Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mind Your Buffalo podcast. This is your host Ravikant, aka the Buffalo Intellectual, and I have a very clickbait title for you today. Is India headed for a dictatorship or not? I mean, like, it is one of those. I'm just going to go straight into it. It's one of those discussions which happen all the time. Like, in fact, I grew up in a generation where everybody's fantasy was that India should be a dictatorship, because they were all like, that's the problem with India, ke hamare paas na, like, we have coalition parties. That is a problem. There is a mixed sarkar, mili juli sarkar. We need strong leader. Like, so in many which ways, I've written about this at length in my book also. Like, Modi became that figure, that fantasy figure for a lot of people who were like, yeah, we need a strong government and all that. But we've kind of come to the arc of the thing, right? So in many which ways, we've come to this point in 2025. Things are beginning to move very quickly politically. In the last 6 months, there is a lot which has kind of happened, and things look very, very precarious. Rahul Gandhi's revelations about findings about the electoral lists, and they're weaponizing it as vote chori, and it's happening at the backdrop of the SIR that is happening in Bihar, where lakhs of names are being struck off the electoral list in the name of revising the lists, and that also happens. So there is all these questions about like whether these are legitimate activities, what's going on. In the middle of it, the government just comes in with this kind of new proposed amendment to which says that if you're a chief minister, prime minister even, and if you're arrested and if you're in prison for more than 30 days consecutively, then you automatically stop being the person. I think the anxiety was like, what happened, I think, with Kejriwal or other opposition leaders. Hemant Soren from Jharkhand had to resign before he went to jail, and like he obviously came out and things like that. But like this, the timing of this amendment, why they're bringing it, and there's all this anxiety that they will use it to weaponize. Like, for instance, if tomorrow, if it got passed, which it hasn't, if it got passed, then it will be like, let's arrest Mamata Banerjee, for instance, and you put her in prison for 32 days. So on the 32nd day or 31st day, she automatically stops being the chief minister. I mean, it's an interesting way of doing this. It is an amendment, so BJP would require a large number of it would require, they don't have the numbers to pass it basically, but the fact that they brought this in such a hurried manner means that they basically probably wanted to change the narrative which was going out of their hand. The narrative was all about vote chori, legitimacy, and they brought this to kind of like go back to trying to, because they knew that the moment they'll introduce this, the Congress and the opposition will fight this, and they get to say, oh look, these people are trying to say that no matter how corrupt, even if you're in prison, your mantriship chair should not go. So it's a desperate attempt, in my opinion, to kind of change the political narrative at a time where they're really struggling. And while I've seen people already start speculating, they're like, oh, this is the end of Modi, are things moving really fast, and like, what happens what happens if Nitish loses Bihar, for instance. Bihar election is coming up and all of that, and Congress is gaining momentum, RJD is doing pretty well. What happens if Nitish loses Bihar? What is the future hold then? Because remember, without Nitish and Chandrababu Naidu support, 12 and 16 MPs respectively, if I'm not mistaken, the government becomes very, very, very dangerously close to falling, because the BJP doesn't have the numbers it needs by itself in that sense. So there are some people who are already kind of gleefully looking at it, and they're like, "Arey, this regime might fall," and all that. actually, it's stuff like that which worries me, which brings me to the point of today's discussion. Can India veer towards a dictatorship? And because you have to understand, like, regimes which have built, it is the way Modi has built power around himself. Forget the opposition. His own party members will be very exposed, or will not let him be, right? So it is like there are, the way they have centralized power, taken total control within their own party, and everything from foreign policy to within local level elections within the BJP, like state level, tehsil level, district level, goes through them, right? So when you have such total control over a party, you tend to make a lot of people very unhappy. So the moment they start like falling, like it'll not just be the ouster of a party or one or two people. It will be the overthrow of an entire way of doing system. Unki khud ki party might go against them, you know. We tend to imagine political parties like these monoliths. BJP is just one unit. No, there are many factions, there are many cliques, there are many divisions and many lobbies within the BJP itself, you know, and they are all very hyper competitive. They are all often fighting each other, getting in each other's way, trying to undercut each other. It's just that when the party is successful, when you have power and when you are dominating, that all of these contradictions are sort of put away on the side, or they're covered up. But the moment, you know, there is blood in the water, the sharks come. The moment the center can't hold, it really starts disrupting very quickly. And I think the men in charge of this regime know that very well, which means they are not going to go down without a fight. And what I mean by that is the transition of power is unlikely to be very, very likely to be very, very messy. Now, what Rahul Gandhi has kind of alleged is that there is widespread tampering with the electoral process. And in my previous episode, I'd kind of talked about how for the longest time people were like EVMs, and I had gone on record, and I'm still on record saying I don't think it's the EVMs, because it's just not feasible, right? Like the elaborate levels of manipulation and total control it would take to go down that route, I didn't think was possible. And to be fair, that's not what Rahul Gandhi is saying either. He's not coming out and saying EVMs are hacked. What he's saying is something even more basic. He's saying the lists are hacked. The way you're making the voter list is suspicion. Names are getting added to it, and the names are getting deleted to it. And I said it the last time also in my previous episode, if I'm not wrong, that if you delete names, if I'm a voter and my name is not on the list, then I will create, I will say something like the opposition will be constantly watching out. It will become news. So voter deletion is trickier, I would imagine, than voter addition. Because मैं देखने नहीं जा रहा हूँ कि how many people are voting. If they say that तुम्हारे in your neighborhood there were 2,217 votes, I actually don't know if 2,217 people live in my neighborhood or if only 1,980 people live. So that additional 300, 400 in a neighborhood or in a mohalla is actually, if you did that, it would be difficult to kind of catch. And that's what the Congress is kind of pointing out, that they have seemingly pulled this off, and they have pulled it off on a massive scale. And I think it's a scale of it which is worrying, because again, I often talk to people who are in election research, who are observers of the political process, and I always like the inner discussion, like, you know, the thing is like you have to assume that the ruling party has a 2 to 3% advantage. आपको मान के चलना पड़ेगा, although होना नहीं चाहिए, but they have it. You have to assume कि because of the incumbency and the party machinery and resources of the state, and when you're in power you are privy to a lot of things and processes, and the more strongly you're in power, the more that percentage goes. But 2 to 3% you मान के चलो that you have an advantage, right? So if I'm an opposition party and I have to beat you, I don't have to just beat you, I have to beat you by more than 3 to 5% for it to actually come out. And I think that reality everybody in India kind of accepts, all political parties kind of accept, and they fight elections only like that it's not going to be like मान के चलो ये this disadvantage is there, but and like they fight for it. They will say that, look, election commission or police or this, they're giving them permission for rallies, or they're looking the other way while we are being, all of that harassment of our candidates and all of that, they will raise a hue and cry, but they understand this is how the process works. So that is not what is being questioned. What is being questioned is the kind of numbers that Rahul Gandhi is alleging. This could lead to a 10 to 12% swing. Let's say 10 to 12% swing is massive, is just massive, because it means that the electoral process is very, very heavily compromised. So the question then becomes that what happens when you try to when you expose this, right? Now the people start checking, now every opposition party, every journalist, every enemy that you've made of every institution, even the courts, the bureaucracy, bureaucracy also has these huge factions within them, these teams, these cadres, they have their own way, they won't fight in public, but they have their own way of keeping track of things. So all of these people, they will now be very closely monitoring it, right? And your capacity to pull it off again, right? You may not immediately lose, but you can't now go back and do it. They figured out what you're doing, and your capacity to go back and pull it off again disappears, right? Which means all subsequent future elections, either you will expose yourself or you no longer are walking in with that level of advantage. And second of all, it means that all the people who were collaborating with you, like election commission or whoever, let's assume that they were, all of this I'm saying is going with assumptions. So please don't come file cases against me. I'm not saying this is I'm just speculating about stuff which is on the public domain in itself. So all the people who are in that scenario, who would be collaborating with you, they would be collaborating with you because they were assuming that they'll nobody will find out, but now the fact is that they are also kind of exposed and they're also kind of culpable. So they might also themselves become a problem, right? So it's no longer just I can't do this again. It also means the people who I was relying on and who I was collaborating might flip, might snitch, might all kinds of things. What happens if somebody brings a case against them, there's an investigation, something there are hajar ways this can play out. So it makes everybody very uneasy, very nervous, very strenuous. There's media poking questions in independent journalists. I don't mean the Godi media, but there are independent journalists who will be looking closely through things. So there's a lot which will be going on right now, right? In situations like this, when the stability of that kind of a centralized power structure is threatened, that's when people in power start becoming desperate. Because realize, understand, there is no like I was saying earlier in the episode, if you are Modi, if you're Shah, if you're these people, and if you have come to power in a certain way, like there is no gentleman's handshake saying, okay, well played, you guys beat us, viva la, democracy, that's not what's gonna happen. You can't gracefully hand the baton and move out. Like there is no end game. You're on this tiger, you have to keep riding, because the moment, like I said, there is blood in the water, sharks will come. So your only option then becomes is to clamp down harder, is to double down, right? You can't be backing down. So when you start losing the credibility and the legitimacy, that's when you start pulling out all these desperate measures. Like one has to then tend to think, where does this all head? And with that context, we can look at India where it is now. Most Indians, educated, people who read stuff, who consider themselves rational, not like conspiracy mongering, they will be like, oh, this is a ridiculous question. This is like clearly one of these podcasters who are like, oh, is India going to be a dictatorship? I agree, it sounds ridiculous, okay, but hang on with me for a second. India is the only South Asian country which has not had some form of authoritarian rule. Okay, Pakistan has had it, Bangladesh has had it, Sri Lanka has had it, Nepal has had it. In fact, South Asian region tends to flip in that direction very, very quickly. And if you look at the pattern into what this happens, if you like, let's say Pakistan is an interesting case study, or even Bangladesh, same patterns, right? What tends to happen which creates this kind of a disruption? Like why does this suddenly come about? And I think, without oversimplifying, in a lot of cases, like in Pakistan's case, you can clearly see they've gone through multiple periods where civilian rule is suspended. Like there's Ayub, there's Zia-ul Haq, there's Yahya Khan in between, there's Musharraf, and in each of those cases, if you see, like the beginnings are exactly kind of like this, where there is a party in power which is beginning to lose credibility, which doesn't want to kind of gracefully hand power over. Like in the case of Pakistan, there was a big Punjabi versus Bengali kind of friction. There was also within the West Pakistan unit, there was a very Sindhi versus Punjabi kind of a unit. There was a whole Muhajir versus the Punjabi system, and no group was willing to kind of be like, okay, in the name of democracy, fine, you guys, fair and square, go ahead. Like nobody wanted to give that away. So when you reach a situation where people who are in those places don't want to give it away, don't want to kind of play by the rules of democracy, which means the rules of the democracy is also, if you lose, you go, right? Like you gracefully move out. And when you don't do that, that's when you start thinking of, what are my options? What if I don't want to go? Who's going to throw me out? It'll have to be some form of police or army, right? So what are my relationships with the police and the army? Do I know anybody there? Do we have some kind of a ideological affinity? Do we have some kind of shared ambition? Is there a role that I can kind of create for the person who can then deliver me that security? Because if I left to the people and the processes, I'm moving out, right? Or I'm gonna lose my capacity to control my own party, in that sense. And that's when the mind starts going in that direction. I was listening to this everybody's favorite journalist, Rajdeep Sardesai. He was narrating the story about Amit Shah's first election. Like as a student leader, he was in ABVP. I don't know whether the story is true or not. I just heard Rajdeep Sardesai talk about it, where Shah is fighting this college election. he's a student himself, and they realize that there are a lot of women voters in the in the college, and if the women voters vote, then he will lose. I like how even back in the day, like Amit Shah was like, okay, women will not vote for me. Like I don't inspire confidence from the women voters. He was fighting against, I think, a Congress student leader, NSUI जो है उनकी. Maybe the Congress had a female candidate, but like even then, like women will not vote for Amit Shah. That some things never change, right? So I'm kidding, like whatever. Because somebody will quickly point out that there are a lot of women from BJP and RSS who clearly vote for him. But anyways, like for the joke to work, like Amit Shah is like fighting and he's like, oh, there are all these women and they will vote against me and I will lose the election. So a day before the election, in the story as narrated by Rajiv Sardesai, him and his friends call up the parents of the girls and say, don't send your daughter to college tomorrow because it's election day, something bad can happen, there might be trouble and it's a contested election. So a lot of parents didn't send their daughters to college the next day, thereby ensuring that he won, because like these women didn't come to college, so they didn't vote, right? Now whether that story is true or fully true or not true or whatever is not the point. I'm just saying if I have to take that story at face value, it reveals a very interesting mindset, right? Like right from the beginning, you're not fighting fair, like, and I know like somebody will be like, oh, elections are nothing about fairness. Yeah, I know all of that, but this mindset itself is like, let's like there are strategies and tactics in elections where you will try to, like, there's no fairness, you'll play dirty and all that. There is all of that, but this is like, let's if like we are playing chess on an electoral board, like let's throw the board over. You turn the board over, like you reset the whole thing, like you go completely out there, right? And in ways which it is not really illegal, but it truly sort of extends and breaks the legitimacy of the process in many ways. And bear in mind that person or has had now a 40-year political career after that moment, and is now the home minister, and like right from the days when Modi and Shah were like in Gujarat, and Amit Shah was the home minister and Modi was the chief minister, there was already a lot of heat on them. BJP as a party itself did not trust either of them at that point in time. Modi's rise from Gujarat chief ministership to becoming their national candidate itself was not a foregone conclusion. Now people forget this, but as late as 2012, 2013 even, there were many people within the BJP who were like, no, Modi is not going to be our prime ministerial face, right? And if someone like Pramod Mahajan, for instance, who that was a freaky death. If Pramod Mahajan, who was young and who was like clearly the favored rising star within the party, if someone like that had been around in this period, like it could have looked very different. So Modi's rise is like a lot of factors, but credit to him, he seized it, because he's already in 2011, 12, 13 in a place in Gujarat where either he has to go for the big one in New Delhi, or in 5-6 years he's finished. His own party will kind of like sideline him because he's playing too aggressively, he's moving too many pieces around. And to his credit, he goes for it and he successfully wins. And Amit Shah still doesn't have the full trust of the party, because remember, he didn't become home minister right away. He becomes like he's put in charge of the party, and then like he famously delivers Uttar Pradesh in the Uttar Pradesh Vidhan Sabha elections, which happens a few years, I think 2017. That really cemented his reputation as, okay, this guy is like, can deliver the results. And that is really the coming together, and eventually 2019 elections, and Amit Shah is now the home minister, has been for a while. So for them, I think both Shah and Modi, the entire paradigm has been go big or go home, right? So if now they are at the stage where they're being kind of called in, it becomes difficult maybe for them to climb back down. So how do you go big beyond this? Like, you already run everything, and your capacity to keep running things is being questioned. So what other option do you have at this point is an important question. And if you look up like the way, like I was saying, how dictatorships have actually taken hold in other parts of South Asia, these are comparable cultures, and I know everything is not the same, comparable cultures and comparable social relations. Pakistan is actually very interesting because a lot of the people within the Pakistani political class historically, they actually dislike the political system. In fact, for a lot of these IT sector educated, techie people, like, they would really gel well with a lot of the Pakistani ruling elite from the 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s, because they were all saying the same thing, that poor people should not have the right to vote. And I think Musharraf even did elections where he said like minimum college degrees needed, you can't vote otherwise. They mistrusted grassroots leaders, they mistrusted like all of these politics of bargaining, of negotiating, and they all fantasized about creating a new political class, and they all thought it could be done top down. So the whole idea was to do it top down. The whole idea was we will create a new political class. I think Ayub tried to do that. He when the military takes over in Pakistan for the first time, he is actually trying to do land reform in Pakistan. He's also creating, he suspends political parties, but all that means is political candidates now run as independents. It's not so difficult. You can't wish them away. So he's trying. He doesn't like the political parties. He doesn't like the political leaders for good reason, because his usual complaints: they're corrupt, they're self-serving, etc., etc., etc. So his solution is to then create a new kind of voting class, a new kind of system. He's passing all these rules where he's saying all political party have to declare their income every year. Nahi karoge to I will ban you, and all leaders, internal elections. He's trying to do all of these things. None of it actually works. It just eventually destabilizes more and more and more. Because one of the main problem in Pakistan in the 1960s is they really don't want to share power with the Bengalis. And then post 71, if you see again during Zia-ul Haq's reign, like Zia-ul Haq again comes to power, he overthrows Bhutto, and like he comes to power, and he is also doing the same thing. And Zia-ul Haq is actually quoting, and he starts leaning towards the Islamizing factions within Pakistan. Like he leans towards all these religious fundamentalists, and he starts passing his reforms or his rule, like he wants to legitimize it through religious authority, because he doesn't have the electoral authority. So sounds very similar, like where he's like, oh, Islam ke liye I'm doing this, and so on and so forth. And he's jailing people, he's torturing people. The entire system kind of like disrupts, but again, he is someone who is also very suspicious of the political class, but he can't really recreate the momentum keeps coming from the ground up. And then again in the Musharraf years, Musharraf again tries the same thing again, where he's like, oh, all these politicians are corrupt, and Benazir Bhutto is in exile, and Nawaz Sharif is exiled, and then he himself starts his own party, does Musharraf, because he's saying, oh, the whole process is that these political parties are the problem, right? And he tries to create a new kind of an electorate, and he tries his new party, and it gets rejected again, it goes out for the voting test, and again like a fractured mandate comes. And what I'm trying to say is that in all of these case studies, and you can look at elections in Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh has had military coups. Currently doesn't have an elected government. It's hoping to transition into one. What you try to see, the pattern is actually very similar. Like regimes, once they lose credibility, Sheikh Hasina is another very great example of this. She had near total control over all these institutions, economy, and like culture, and people like Shakib Al Hasan, for instance, like probably Bangladesh's best ever cricket talent, right? Cricketing talent, and Shakib Al Hasan, and Bangladesh is a very cricket mad country, and he's like their best cricketing talent, and he's basically been in exile for the last 2 years. He I don't think he lives in Bangladesh also now, ever since the Sheikh Hasina coup she got overthrown. I think he lives in Dubai, and he no longer plays for Bangladesh, and he's just out of the whole thing. Like, that's how much reach Sheikh Hasina had, like from cricket to like people in her party controlled the Bangladesh cricket board. They were in culture, they were in arts, they were in economy, they were in every facet of political control that you can imagine. They were like nearly invincible. She had actually dismissed she ran the last election practically uncontested, because the other parties didn't participate in the election, or whatever, the elections were not very free. I could be missing some details, don't come at me with no, actually this was the thing, but basically she was nearly fully in charge, and then the collapse happens very quickly. And in the case of Bangladesh currently, it is not a military ruler. It is it's a very interesting model for South Asia, which we've actually not seen, where you overthrow a politician like that, and the military does not take charge. Instead, they've put this Nobel laureate, this senior guy, as the face of the government. I don't know enough about. I don't track Bangladesh as closely as I track maybe Pakistan, so I don't really know what's going on, in the sense who's really in charge and who's because this guy, Yunus, he is not, has never been the kind of person who can pull this off by his own. This is not his. He's probably the respectable face consensus candidate, but from what I'm sensing now, there is impatience with him also. They're like, okay, this dude needs to do elections and move on and change things around. So my point is, when things collapse, they collapse very quickly, right? And ground mobilizations are very key, and these kind of shifts and changes come from nowhere. So there are 2 or 3 forces we need to kind of really look at. One is the people in charge. When they start becoming really desperate, they start looking for what options they have, right? And we've seen this in India, right? Like Indira Gandhi calling for the emergency was in many cases very similar. She was beginning to feel the walls close in, too many things are happening, so she declares the emergency. I think one of the reasons why personally, this is my theory, why she removed the emergency is because she comes from the family who's like sort of neo royalty, right? Like it is theirs. Like, her father is Jawaharlal Nehru, and she herself grew up during the freedom movement, and I think it was a very big burden on herself to leave a legacy of having disrupted electoral democracy. Like, she comes from a generation which saw the freedom struggle, participated in it. Her father has this great legacy, her grandfather had this legacy, and now she's like a very strong prime minister, and then she calls for the emergency, and like, to if she doesn't flip it back, then she's basically disrupting that thing. So I think it may have been a very big, it's not as simple as that. I think it may have been a very big factor also. I think, and I've read some of these, some of the commentaries from that era of, some great books have come on emergency last 4-5 years. I think she also had faulty intelligence. I think, like, her intelligence, people had kind of led her to believe that if she did elections, she would do much better, and I think she kind of overestimated that element of it and underestimated just how much. And that tends to happen in dictatorial regimes. All the ugly, messy protest, this, that, tamasha that you don't like, it is actually a very real, good method of understanding the pain points in a system. You might not like dealing with it every day if you're a politician or a ruler, but you at least can see where the pain points are. When you threaten, intimidate, and wipe everything away, and like put people away, like, people will like suddenly not stop feeling the pain. They will be in pain, but they will just not come out and tell you. So the moment you remove the barriers, like, you're going into it blind, is what I'm saying. So I think, in that sense, Indira and Modi are different, because for her it's it was a family project, right? It was a personal project, Indian democracy. Whereas these guys have come from the opposite tradition. They are not the party which fought for the independence. They are in fact the parallel tradition of the Savarna mobilization, right? So there is the Gandhian Congressy mobilization, which post independence became like this client patron kind of a thing, where they took over all the institutions of the British and became the new ruling class. And in many which ways, even now, if you go into like many parts of North India, actually even South India, you will still find hardcore Congresses, because in many ways they are coming from that tradition. And the Janasangh and then later the BJP is the opposite tradition. They were really small players. They had pockets of influence, mostly in central India, in MP, and pockets of Rajasthan, some parts of like urban Pune and all that. And they came out of that tradition. Like, they've slowly built their RSS network across India wherever it was necessary. They it is a grassroots movement, whether you like it or not. It is a very long-term mobilization. There are generations of, like, there would be a generation of Sanghi, like who was born in the Shaka, worked all their life in the Shaka, built it up, set up these systems, and they've done that. Like, they've grew out of that. And I think somewhere in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and like lots of commentaries on it, the Savarna mobilization shifts from Congress to this new thing. So that parallel tradition exists, and if Rahul Gandhi is to become a prime minister, that shift has to happen again. And here's the interesting element of it. I think while the transition was happening away from the Congress, Rajiv Gandhi gets assassinated. So there is a gap in the Congress machinery, right? Rajiv Gandhi, we have no idea, had he lived, how the politics of the 90s would have turned out. We have no idea how he would have done. Like he was not a fan of Mandal politics, by the way. he was like we don't know how Congress would have fared, whether it would have been relevant or not. But like without Rajiv Gandhi and till Sonia Gandhi starts coming into the picture in early 2000s, late 90s, the Congress is basically being run by, you know, tier 2 leadership, you know, which always knew that they will be number 2 to Indira, Sanjay, Rajiv, and all of these guys. And now suddenly, like, you know, they are in charge. So they were trying to figure out who will be basically, you know, leading the pack. So you have Sharad Pawar, you have Narasimha Rao, you have Sitaram Kesari, you have all these regional leaders. Everyone's trying to figure out like what's the best way to go, you know, within this vacuum. And I think somewhere within that, you know, Congress started losing its traditional base, which started shifting towards BJP, which started seeming more and more like the reliable underdog, which deserves its chance in the, you know, sun, which deserves its shot. So that kind of flip happened. Now it seems we are coming in 2025, 2026, in the next few years, that flip is again coming back, where like a lot of that base, that Savarna mobilization, the consolidation, you know, is beginning to say, okay, we tried Modi, we tried BJP, things are really not like, some things are okay, but like things are really not very good. Also, you know, there is that nostalgia for the Congress, which never truly went away, by the way. There were questions 10 years ago about Rahul Gandhi's ability. He was seen as an out of touch fourth generation dynast, but like he's really come into his own. He's paid the dues, as they say. He's walked across India literally, and now he comes off as like a seasoned, grizzled veteran who's taken all the punches, and now he's counter-attacking. So there is this feeling, there is this growing vibe that okay, now let's give him a chance, right? He's earned his part, and these guys, they had their run, the BJP, and they had 10 years. Now these guys are aging out, like let's try this out. So I think some of that shift is happening. What is very interesting now is how will that transition happen? Like I said, Congress is a very different kind of formation. Like it's the same thing, but like it's the same Savarna centric mobilization, but it was always rooted in the family. It was already rooted in the families in the center, and then there will be that second tier leadership who are basically working as also it's a hub and spoke model, as I say, who are also the second tier leaders are also like the core, and like they have their third tier, and so on and so on. And I think when the shift happens in the 90s, the Congress doesn't really have a strong core in the party, in the family. BJP is not a family oriented party. It is a organizational setup which has been in many which ways last 10 years centralized under the leadership of Modi, and so he's the main guy now. So unless he falls really unwell, or you know, untimely, you know, gets goes out of action, he seems very much, you know, healthy, lucid. He's doesn't seem to have any medical issues that we know of. He's not going to be very easy to hand over power. So you're dealing with more like Indira in the mid 1970s situation, where she's seeing the wall, where he's also seeing the walls close in. He's also seeing his own party start to like jump at the bits. All the usual tricks that he tried are not working anymore, and even the things which worked for him, like there's also bad timing. Like Donald Trump has suddenly gone rogue on him. Like Donald Trump was his personal sort of like equation he had built, and when Trump came back to power for the second time, I'm sure he would have expected like, oh, this is going to work well for me. It's actually worked much worse than if a Democrat was in power. Entire Indian foreign policy of the last 7-8 years has been torn to shreds. This idea that India would be in the American camp, the Americans have really you know, put that to test. So now suddenly you're seeing, you know, India scrambling to come closer to Russia, come closer to China, and we're like, the regime looks very shocked with how the Americans have dealt. So that has come back in a major way and has embarrassed the government. So I think there are some of these things which are just catching up, and he's feeling the walls close in. And for people like Narendra Modi, for people like Amit Shah, how do they react when that happens? Are they going to sit back in their chair and go like, well, we had a good run, guys, we had a good run, like, we were peripheral players in Gujarat, remember, like, like, Gujarat was a Congress state, and we went all the way from Gujarat to coming to power, and we ran this, and we removed Article 370, we built the Ram Mandir, well done, we had a good innings. Now powers are shifting, I'm too tired for this, and let the chips fall where they may. That's not going to happen, right? So this is where you start really thinking, okay, what options do they have, right? Either you will start, and I hope I'm fully, totally, completely wrong, but if this starts intensifying, and if the Bihar election heats up, and if it starts losing narrative, you have to remember, next couple of years, a very high voltage elections coming up. Bengal goes to vote, Tamil Nadu goes to vote, Gujarat goes to vote. Rahul Gandhi has already gone to the parliament, and he's pointed out to the BJP and said, oh, we are beating you in Gujarat the next time. And he's quietly done a lot of reorganization within the Gujarat. I think the Congress, he understands that the problem with the Congress in Gujarat is, see, even when Congress has been losing, even during peak Modi years when he was chief minister, Congress is getting 37% vote in Gujarat. That is not a joke, right? It's a two-party state mostly. BJP gets 40-45%, Congress is getting 37-38%. 37-38% vote is no joke. And I think what has happened is he's not very confident of his own Congress party machinery in Gujarat anymore, because the way these guys operate, the way the BJP operates, maybe Rahul Gandhi and the Congress people, and I've heard some people say this, that they suspect that a lot of them have been co-opted by the BJP, and to win in a state like Gujarat, for the Congress, like, you can't be in a friendly fight with the BJP. You have to really be Arya Par, and he's looking for rebuilding the party, because all the old timers in Congress Gujarat unit are in some way, state, shape, form, are doing business with the BJP. Like, if you're out of power, Congress has been out of power in Gujarat for almost 20 years, more than that, right? When you're out of power for that long, you have to sort of bargain with the ruling party, because you're a politician in a state where you're in opposition for 25 years, which means all your businesses, all your commercial interests, all your personal life, dirty laundry, like, everything is fully open to the regime, and has been for the last 20 years. They're too powerful, so you have to kind of cooperate with them a little bit. And I think what Rahul Gandhi has made it very clear to the Gujarat unit, this has to stop. And I think he's rebuilding. I think the next Gujarat election might be very interesting. UP is obviously the big one everyone's gonna look at, but Uttarakhand will also go to elections. These are some very big ticket things which are coming up, and in many which ways, if these don't start playing out like the way the regime thinks, and especially if voter list manipulation was a gig that they were playing, and now they can't really do it as efficiently, it can flip very quickly. In that scenario, what options do they have? You may start seeing arrest of opposition members. You may start seeing executive order laws being passed which are very random, which criminalize certain kind of political opposition. Already you're seeing sedition level charges, or very serious charges being brought up against journalists, like Siddharth Vatharajan and all of the, like, the Wire guys and all, basically were writing critically against BJP. So you might start seeing like a lot more intensity to this. Like I with my friends, I have this very dark joke where I keep telling them that, like, सब कोई बोल रहा है fascism, like, this is not what fascism looks like. Actually, like, it's very pleasant for what fascism is, because they're really not like breaking down the doors and kicking skulls, unless you're like, Muslims or scheduled caste or whatever in certain pockets. They're really not doing it to English speaking upper caste critics of the regime. When that starts happening, that's when you realize, oh, they are really now turning up the heat. And I have a feeling that may start happening, like police action, and like it'll start like that. It'll be police action, it will be like a like serious cases, people being beaten up, people being arrested, disappeared. Like, you can keep going to the courts. Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, our court system is very strong. Is it really? Courts may fight back, people will, like, there's resilience in South Asian politics. And one of the things about India is our grassroots mobilization has always been very strong. It's not so easy to do these things, but I'm just playing out a what if scenario, hence the question. Is it possible? If it were to happen, this is how I imagine it would happen. Okay, like, you might see a large scale arrests, you might start seeing strange laws getting passed, and you might start seeing a lot of disruption being normalized. Gangs of people will suddenly, like, stop discussions. A lot more people will start going to at least face legal charges or mob intimidation or cases or arrests for social media posts. Like, I know this is already happening, but like at a much higher level, like, and when you do that at a higher level, people will fight back also with a higher level. Like, you start arresting politicians, you start like beating up journalists, you start throwing people in jail for Twitter and Facebook posts, there will be backlash also. And when that backlash comes from the people, that's when you call in the Rapid Action Force, the CRPF, the, God forbid, the army. And that's when we really need to find out what the core of the armed forces is. Armed forces in India have so far in 70 years not displayed any interest in taking political sides. But if it comes to that, then what does it change? To my understanding is, I don't think the armed forces we are in the danger of an armed forces takeover. I don't think so, because in the case of, like, let's say Pakistan, like the first time it happened, there was a like, the Pakistani army was predominantly a Punjabi army, and they wondered what would happen if there was Bengali leadership, right? In this case, it's slightly different, because here, even if you remove BJP and put in the Congress or an India alliance government, from the armed forces perspective, it really is not a change to the fabric of how they see the nation. It is civilian rule, and it has gone through civilian process. They don't really feel the need to intervene. But however, if the regime starts taking liberties with how they're dealing with opposition and pushback from the people, which, like I said, they're unlikely to quietly take it and retire with grace. So at that point, what does the military apparatus or the paramilitary apparatus of the state think? What do they start feeling like? Do they start feeling uneasy, like, okay, the civilian processes are like falling apart, we need to step in and restore order, like, we don't want to run things, but like, they're literally like having street battles every 10 days. This is not good. We need to kind of Remember, that's how it also began in Pakistan, by the way. So I'm not saying that's what it will go down as, but I'm just like posing a what if scenario. Can it happen? I don't know. I'm just asking some questions. I hope this episode doesn't get flagged or banned or whatever, because I don't think I have said anything that this is going to happen or this is happening. I'm clarifying very clearly. I'm just asking, speculating if such things can happen, right? And as an academic, as a person who looks at cultural commentary and often wonders about the journey of the nation, this is something that whether we should. It's very scary, and I hope like I'm completely wrong and good times prevail, and we all go to watch the next Shah Rukh Khan movie together, and we forget this whole precarious episode and we laugh. Okay, remember we joked about, and like there is IPL 24/7, and Virat Kohli makes a comeback to the test team, and Thala plays in IPL forever, and we hope that's how it is. And on that good note, cheery note, thank you everybody for listening. I hope none of us get arrested. Bye bye. Hey, you finished the whole episode. Well done. I can't believe you can tolerate my voice for so long. But in case you liked what you heard, you might consider also joining for the exclusive episode that I do for my paying subscribers, because that show gets into slightly edgier topics and I don't really want to put it out in the public domain. It's available on the Patreon as well as on YouTube through the join option. And in case you don't want to drop extra money, I completely understand. Please keep listening to my regular show. I'm grateful as ever. There's a buy me a coffee link in case you want to drop some love. Otherwise, just have a nice day. Stay being awesome. Bye bye.